Arlena from the group, the community group that's been working on this for the last 9 months, for being here tonight to answer any questions for the council. This is really the first public presentation that this group has done to kind of bring anybody and everybody up to speed. They have met a couple times with the rec commission to get feedback from the rec, but outside of that, this is really the first time. So they've been working on it for about 9 months. There are other community members. Mr. Bowersox is also on the committee, as well as Cassidy Burton is on the committee. But Casey and Arlena really have taken the lead role for the committee and the work that's been done. They've been working on it for about 9 months now. Multiple meetings. Jay, I want to thank you for being here. He's also been coming to a lot of meetings, and again, everything you're going to see here is preliminary. Nothing concrete by any means, obviously, because that's a council decision. But we wanted to bring this to the council in a work session so that questions can be answered. You guys can hear what has happened in the committee, and how they kind of developed the plan that they have so far. From here, the plan really is to present to you guys and then kind of start community outreach with different groups throughout the community, get feedback from them, and continue to evolve the plan similar to what we did with Sullivan Square. So we just wanted to get kind of a baseline established so that we could work from there and have some sort of an idea, a working document to work off of. So with that, I'm going to ask Jay to kind of present his PowerPoint piece graciously put together for the council, and we'll go from there.
Well, thank you all, council members, for having me in to speak. Honestly, this is just kind of an assemblage of the work that's, Casey mentioned, has been kind of ongoing, so it's a documentation of that. So I'll jump in real quick. This is going to be a bit like drinking through a fire hose, so stay with me. I'm going to go quick because it wound up being a lot more slides than I thought we would have. So I think you're all aware of the building that we're talking about. But making sure that you understand that the building that already is on the National and State Register of Historic Places is kind of a big deal. That one, the phrase "they don't build them like that anymore" is very real. But that designation does a nice job of setting up the project to receive some tax credit funding, which is a really nice funding stream. Unlike grants, as long as we're complying with SHPO's interpretation of the Secretary of the Interior standards for rehabilitation of historic structures, those tax credits are pretty much a guaranteed thing. I don't know if you've had much chance to kind of dig back through, but when a building gets put on the register, there's a whole history and lineage of the building that's put on there with it. And this building was actually it was the gym for the high school. Until, I don't know, sometime, I'm not sure when they got split, the properties actually got split, but was originally constructed in the 40s as part of FDR's WPA project to try and get us out of the Depression. And the building was making good progress, moving along, and World War II decided to happen. And so all of a sudden, the federal government, I guess, decided to prioritize, and they moved all the workers associated with this to KU to start finishing their military science building, because I guess we needed a military science building during war. What's important about that is the piece of it that there's a whole documentation of how high school students actually dug the water line. We didn't have utilities quite out that far in the 40s, I guess. So they're digging the water lines and grassroots finishing the project. Carpenters were coming in and laying the floors. There was food being served. It became a grassroots effort that Baldwin just kind of made happen. Dug in and did it. It was a little more than 9 months ago, but we did go through a process where the building was offered as a donation. And we did public outreach, had groups in to look and prioritize that, and there was kind of an overwhelming majority looking at saying, hey, we need to save this building and stabilize it. So that's a little bit of that's a very brief snippet of the history of this building. There's a lot more to it. Yes. So why a community building for Baldwin? The existing building obviously was laid out to be a gymnasium space, so it's going to lend itself towards those type of uses in moving forward. So why a community building for Baldwin? One, and most importantly, it's kind of a missing piece that the community needs. But so out of all those discussions came the idea of a survey to go out to the community and see what the response would be to the question of these pieces. A survey was sent out, was it 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, for this, and the responses that came back were pretty strongly in favor of the idea of would you or your family use a community center? That was really the discussion of the first that was the crux of it. And we came back with an 82% yes and an 18.2 no. So it's pretty strong in favor of the idea of the community building for Baldwin. And these are some of the results that you see here on the side. As a result of that, thought was, okay, well, let's probe this a little further, gather some more information, and see where we're landing on this. And a second survey was then issued. And that one, primarily, this was the question. Would you like, and maybe you all took this, and hopefully you did. Would you like to see the old gym at 720 Chapel turned into a community center? And again, we had a similar kind of response in terms of numbers. Pretty strong on the yes side, and not so strong on the no side. And so, associated with both of these surveys, there was the ability, I think, for individuals to write in additional information and say, hey, we'd like to see this, can we incorporate these pieces, those kind of things. And so we're still kind of taking those and, getting them shuffled into the card deck to see what we can and make happen. But so this is kind of the where the existing building stands and where we are in terms of today really starting collecting public comment and thoughts on it. When this process started, we were looking at receiving the building as a donation. Obviously, things were beginning and ideas were starting to surface. And as part of that, in order to inform a good thought process in terms of what this building might cost in the end and what it may take to actually take care of it, save it, restore it, all those things, you really do have to start thinking about what in the end it may be, and looking at how spaces would lay out, where bathrooms might go, all those kind of things that would be required. And so that process was started. We had a quick meeting with potential stakeholders and kind of penciled out a quick program. From the information that we've now collected in the survey, those kind of pieces will actually start to inform more where we are. But those are additional pieces that are fairly new to this process. We generated initial plans. It's always easier for people who aren't doing buildings to have something to look at to respond to. If you just say, oh, here's, maybe we'll do this, maybe we'll do this, but it's not concrete, and they can't see something, it gets more challenging. So we studied the existing building, looked at what uses might go in it, and threw down some ideas so that we could then start to look at the potential of what this may cost, how we might want to fund that, all those kind of pieces. One of the great things about existing buildings, especially these old buildings, is they give you parameters. They give you X and Y. Then you start working on Z. And Z doesn't make sense if you're really modifying or changing something drastically in X and Y. The fact that the building exists on the register, again, adds to that. So it's a very focused kind of piece, and the building starts lending itself to intelligent answers and ways to handle it and make it viable and moving forward. The community engagement piece, I think, is really going to start strongly now, and you'll see that later in our schedule. But obviously, we're needing to meet with the public and seek and listen and gather that information. The surveys are the beginning of that. Then develop and provide public forums, and we've been debating how we're going to do that based on the fact that we're all wearing masks, but it may be much more of a virtual effort in this case. but figuring out how we can begin to perform that, and then obviously all that is part of community outreach. So this is kind of the beginning thoughts of once the building was received by donation, we started thinking, hey, how do we look at this? What is it going to take? How do we save this building? It was in need of, it is and still is in need of work. But these are just some of the images of the original drawings that are part of that on the register piece. So this is kind of the cover page. But we can jump to the next one too, please. One of the interesting pieces about this is, so obviously this was the old high school and this was the gym that supported it, right? And when the two properties were split, this is kind of what is left for property for this building. So it kind of came down quite a bit. So we've been strategically thinking of intelligent ways to get parking close to this building, because that's one of the struggles with adaptively reusing an urban site. So what you're seeing here is what we have kind of come up with is angled parking along 8th Street. The idea of doing proposed parallel parking along Chapel here. There are other ideas looking across 8th Street to see how much parking we can get here, but this is the challenge of this site. The other piece that you may not really know is that the elevation of the finished floor of this building is quite a bit higher than 8th Street. There's some change. And so what you're seeing here is a series of sidewalks, which are actually very low ramps, so that we are managing to make the entire facility accessible. Certainly wasn't designed that way back in the 40s, but any process like this would bring it up to compliance. Yes, please. So this is, again, there's incredible drawings on the state's website, and we were able to find these drawings. So this is an outline of the building. Any of these kind of walls that you're seeing that are this light color are obviously the original walls. And they're load-bearing stone. Like I said, they don't build them like this anymore. So the dash lines that you're seeing are proposed work that we would talk about potentially as part of probably any renovation needing to remove. They're just, these are old rusty lockers that I've already had people begging, saying, hey, can I come and get my old gym locker? Like, okay, it's kind of rusty. That's a lot of smelly socks. But
It's gonna smell worse than it did when they used it.
but the existing restrooms are just of another age. There's, so all those kind of pieces we're looking at potentially taking out, replacement of doors, the stuff you would expect. This actually is, that's fine. This little bit right here is actually demolition of the existing slab to support what would be, as part of an addition, if a mezzanine is incorporated, part of an elevator pit that we would use to make that accessible and gain that additional square footage. So go ahead, please. So imagine if you just bent over and grabbed hold of the concrete slab and tore it off the building, right? So this is what's below the slab that's there. There's a tunnel system that runs all the way around, and this was the connection over to the high school for the steam pipes. When it was built, it was nothing but heat, right? So what you're looking at here, and here, this is the elevator pit I just mentioned, and then the potential for some new columns. So we have to, if that holds, and we move in that direction. There may be some work there, but strategically planning our restrooms to utilize this tunnel system. So where we put in new bathrooms, we're running it there instead of cutting out slab and trying to go through all the dirt. So that's what you'll see on maybe the next slide here. So this is one rendition or idea that I think might be put forward for the public to comment on and give us ideas on. But the idea is to create a true entry for the space. It kind of has two ends. But looking at creating a true entry and then kind of a backdoor entry, creating a reception space here and opening up some holes so that we have good supervision of the overall space, because right now that doesn't present itself. An idea of a youth area / game room here to support youth in the facility directly off that, so there's some good supervision right there. Then looking at multi-purpose rooms or one single room with some kind of mountable partition or accordion piece that can be pulled back. So you have flexibility, yoga on one side, cards on the other, what have you. new restrooms. Here's your elevator, proposed elevator, which would be a Lula. I think it might be the first elevator in Baldwin, with the exception of maybe the university. But it is it's a commercial elevator intended to do up to 3 stops, where traditional elevators will go as high as 5 or 6. And so it's fully compliant, fully ADA. The equipment room would be here. A warming kitchen, so the idea that you could bring food in and then serve through an opening that would be opened onto this space is in the blue color there. Back door and then janitor's closet, not so much the exciting stuff there. And then obviously the gym space right now is being proposed as a gym space, so a place to play. And looking at how we could morph this facility in terms of how it was originally arranged, we are looking at likely taking up the old floor. In this case, it has had enough damage over time, and we believe that is the original floor. But the ability to mark that floor with new options for different sports arrangements to play structured sports if we want is very real. So you can see here, this might be your basketball court with retractable. Right now, everything is fixed, right? Back in the 40s, they bolted it to the wall and it was done, right? Now we raise and lower it so our kids can play all the way from 5 on up to 60. So this is just a variety of different pieces that you can have. But the idea of retractable pieces that can quickly morph that space so that you can use it for many different types of play is really important. And I think the facility will do it. In this idea, we did go ahead and add the distance from the east side of the facility to this kind of common wall between the gym space is really very much a residential dimension in terms of how you would stand things. So it became very obvious that it would be very quick to go inside of this and frame up from the floor below and create space up here. Now what that space could be used for, currently we're showing it as an office function, but what it does, I think it's going to add around, I have it on the sheet, I think it's around 1,000 and some square feet very quickly, just added to the facility. And it's very easily framed in and done. And so it also provides us with the opportunity to create, we need stairs up obviously to it, but the idea of creating a viewing platform, so if people are dropping kids off to play in a structured event or however, you can come up here and actually look down and see what's going on. Again, you see the elevator arriving, and just this can be any kind of space up here. We return to more multi-purpose rooms, but good option to gather some additional space in a site that doesn't want to expand and a building envelope that doesn't want to change because of the register. So we're getting as much square footage as we can. So if you're standing on the platform that I just mentioned, this is how things might begin to fold up. You kind of have to look at how in the end all these Tinkertoy pieces come together. And so you can see the main basketball pieces, the volleyball piece folding this way. This would be your batting cage that they have these that just kind of hoist straight up and collect themselves as they go. We'd also talked about some additional fixed basketball goals on this side just to give more. So if you have more kids there, some high, some playing low, that kind of thing. And then ceilings up in the upper floor. These little circle pieces. It is important to realize that since the building's on the register, you can't really go outside and do a whole lot else than restore what's there. And so cutting in new windows is very challenging that aren't on the exterior of the building. And so these are proposed light tube pieces that you'll see up on the roof later that bring natural light down into that space. So whatever that becomes, we're still getting natural light. They'll still have great views because all of these windows that are along the original gym space right here, up high, those would get restored as part of the requirements, frankly, of SHPO for rehabilitating buildings. Here's the roof. The structure does have a new roof. There's a number of pieces that we would go in and look at adding. I think we'd add a couple ladders here and here just to facilitate better maintenance up there. I was up there 2 or 3 times, and you'd be amazed. It's like 1, 2, 3. There's a lot of roofs. And then these were those lights that you're seeing dropping in with some new mechanical units up top to support what was heating and cooling of this space. These type projects are really great. Old buildings that are restored and rehabilitated just sing. They're just built different. They look so good when they're done, but they don't change a lot. They just look fresh and new. So this is pretty much what we will be looking at doing, I think, as a scope, if we're going to actually receive tax credits. This is where the State Historical Society gets very, very involved. They want things put back the way they were as best we can. So you'll see restoration of these steel windows that we believe are still up there. We'll add storm windows on the inside. Windows down low that have already been replaced, which is almost all of them, would be an evaluation process. But then we'd be repointing masonry, repairing stone that has had significant damage, those kind of pieces. And this is the same thing. This is where the mezzanine would be built in right here. This was actually the old stage. That's where that 2-story piece is. And so there's a proscenium in there, and then these windows drop into the gym itself, which is directly across from this. So again, there'll be a lot of natural light in the facility. This would be a section cut in the east-west direction, so you can see the seating area where we would potentially create an observation deck. Some of the pieces folded down out of the ceiling component, and then office component, multi-purpose, kind of back in here. There's some ideas of trying to chain link in and create cubbies here for if kids do come here after school to have a place to put the backpacks. They come to play a basketball game, they have a place to put their duffel bags so it's not all over the floors, those kind of things. And then you see the windows again showing up here. So when we pull the plywood off those and restore those windows, which we'll be required to do, there'd be an amazing amount of natural light in there. I think it'd be really pretty nice. And then this is a section cut the other way in the north-south direction, kind of paralleling 8th Street, looking back at the new mezzanine here and the stairs supporting it, and then this kind of cubby piece and the components folded out. Here's your batting cage that would come straight down, and this would fold down. New entry piece. We developed one of these openings into some kind of a reception window so that there's somebody hopefully there to receive the public when they come in. And then this would be back kind of over through the warming kitchen or through that back vestibule piece. Yes, please. So again, all of this was kind of generated as ideas so that we could inform this effort, really, so that we're pulling together good numbers and understanding what we need to do in terms of funding stream for it. So based on the drawings that you saw there, which are at best preliminary, but we came up with a construction number of 1.8. Then inside of that 1.8, there's all kinds, that's for pure construction. That's this yellow line right here. Then there's all these other soft cost pieces, paying architects, paying engineers, paying hazardous materials remediation, hazardous materials surveys, special inspections when you get into construction, on and on and on. So all these other soft costs, furniture, fixtures, and equipment, begin to add up to this number. Now, assuming the project does follow the SHPO guidelines, which I don't think you will have a choice but to do because of its presence on the register, I believe you're looking at a value of somewhere in the $470,000 range for tax credit savings. And what that looks like is basically 21% of qualifying expenses is how they categorize that. They won't pay for everything, but they'll let you count certain pieces. So this is an estimate number for sure. But when you take that 2.2 and you subtract off the 4, you're kind of back down around to this 1.7 number, which is what we believe the project overall will cost. from a design and construction standpoint, we're kind of right here. You guys might have to zoom in on this. These get really small, but we're kind of right here on the red line, and you can see that the idea is, I believe, to take this to a vote in April, and that gets us to kind of this blue dot right here. Then I think there would be, assuming that what comes out of all of this meeting and all this public engagement and all these various meetings leaves you with a pretty informed and good direction right here. So this part of the facility, this part of this process, the design side, I think winds up being pretty streamlined, because I think you will already have good ideas of where you're going, what it costs, all those things. And then, so all of that gets you down to here, which is a bid negotiations and award. So there's roughly 2 months there to bid the project. Usually you want at least a 30-day window, and you need at least a couple of weeks usually to get through contracts, those kind of things. Contractor shows up maybe a week later to start actual work. So that gets you to this blue dot right here, and given 8 to 9 months of construction, that gets you out to this point. So from a proposed funding stream, I don't talk about this a lot, so I may step all over myself, but there have been a number of ideas put out there. One is 1/4 cent sales tax, and another is 1/2 cent sales tax. I think you can see what that means for $100 that you're spending. It's just not really a significant amount of, it's significant, but it's not a big number. And then obviously the tax credits that we talked about, and there's that 21% value of qualifying expenses, which I think looks like $470,000 for the project. And so I'm not sure that we have real strong direction. These are two ideas that have been put out there as potential funding streams. And then where we kind of go from here, I think we have good information to share with the public to give them a kind of a sounding board and an idea to start, so they can look at it and start saying, hey, this is good, no, we'd like to see this, collecting that information, presenting to the community at large, however we figure out how to do that in the days of COVID. And then really what I think this group is seeking is community-wide involvement, so that the community is feeling ownership in the project. And then as discussed earlier, all of this is in preparation for that kind of anticipated sales tax vote in April of 2021. That was quick. So I guess I stand for questions and answers.
I have a quick one that I noticed back in the slideshow. You said when it showed the gym, it said not full size court. Did it shrink because of the construction, or was Baldwin planning on a not full size
Never
court?
been regulated.
It's never been regulated.
Okay.
It's perfect for old.
It's regulation.
It's perfect.
Hey,
Could be a little shorter.
for junior high.
Perfect for play.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, it's well short.
Okay.
I can tell you in the 40s.
I was young, so I don't remember. It was big to me then, you know, so I think the IC is
Oh,
It's not now.
when it was the first game in the gym was Baldwin versus Eudora High, and then the next night, because for some reason I don't know why, but Baldwin Baker's gym had burned. They actually wound up playing that Saturday night against, I think it was a team from Western Kansas.
winded,
I'm sorry.
and they were winded.
Yeah. No, it is not a regulation court. The volleyball court is everything else is regulation with the exception of overhead. The building itself, as it sits, has around a little more than 20 feet overhead, which ideally we'd have 23. But lifting a roof structure that wouldn't work for fair services. So the only two limitations that I see to this space are, you're right, it is a slightly smaller basketball court and a little bit of limitation overhead. I don't think that's an issue at all for basketball. Volleyball, every once in a while you move on something, but
Is a basketball court, is it standard? You know, a soccer pitch can be 110 yards, 105, it depends on your home field, whatever you want it to be. just like a baseball field, you can kind of, is basketball required to be a specific size? It
Well,
does, okay.
I think it depends on
To be
what age.
regulation,
Yeah.
yeah, so
Yeah.
I think for younger ages, there is no, but there's not a competitive league.
Correct. And so again, I think it is important to keep in perspective that I think it is a community building and it's meant to foster play. And, but to say that it's going to be a officially sanctioned high school venue, I
You can do tournaments in there, but recreational play is really all
Sure.
it's for. Regarding the tax credits, are those for rehab process only, or are ongoing maintenance costs that could also apply for credits? Just,
don't know. The only time I've ever utilized those is for capital improvements.
for the initial.
Yep. And they do have two, no, there's more than two, there's 4 or 5 different ways to go about that. One is preservation, which is creating a museum out of the building. This would be looking at a rehabilitation, which the idea is to utilize those tax credits, but make that building viable and moving forward, serving its community or whatever its purpose was, not kind of becoming a museum. And so, there's no real difference in that regard. I don't know the answer to that.
That's most likely probably.
Not that I'm aware of. That's not to say if you do work on the structure again in the future that you couldn't go back for those again, but I'm not sure that it would pay for daily operations.
When it's operations, but upkeep, maintenance, repair, I guess what I was thinking. Maybe, I should have to need to see the list of qualified expenses to kind of judge whether they'd be ongoing.
Right. Because like the windows that have been removed on the lower level already, they won't let us count those. If we go in and restore the windows that are up high, we can count every bit of it. And so, but I'll ask that question because I've not been asked that
Yeah,
question.
Scott, I guess, to piggyback on that, so I think what he's saying is like, let's say a ball gets hit up against one of the historic windows and it breaks it, and we have to restore that window back, then I'm presuming that's what you're saying.
Yeah, or you have structural issues that you don't have today, you now have in 10 years, get it back to.
Between that Chicago and ask for, I'll get you the answer.
I'm just almost sure that for what it's worth, in my evaluation of the building and walking around it, the bones are good. It does not appear to be having significant structural issues. Mechanical system, there's a lot of other pieces that aren't worth it, but the bones are good. But you're right, if all of a sudden you started having structural issues and you went in to repair that in order to maintain the historic material, that's going to qualify. I'm sure of that.
Is there an ideal amount of parking spaces for a building like this? It seems like 19 are pretty close, but I don't know.
I mean, I would hope that it's, that it proves to not be enough, because that means it's being really used. I think this number is satisfactory. If we look at city ordinance, I think we're very, very close to what would be required for the square footage that we have. Again, I think there are some other alternatives that we're looking at that aren't necessarily presented here, but I do think improvement along 8th Street, the spaces, those 19 spaces are pretty important.
Is that 19, that doesn't include the ones parallel from the
Correct.
How far up is that? I mean, can't go all the way east, can you? How far east can you go from Main Street?
Well, technically, I mean, that's all city right away, which is the sidewalk,
The whole length
the whole walk is. Yeah, we looked at, the last meeting, this was just a few days ago, we talked about, maybe measuring from the sidewalk to the edge of the street and seeing if we could get more angle parking in there,
They've got it more that way, for sure. engineering pieces,
It would just be nice to know that you could expand if you needed to. You know, maybe start with 19, it becomes a long work out. I think that would be the part of the point of the building.
One of the things is that since it is a smaller tool, there's only one activity that can take place at a time. You can't play volleyball and basketball at one time.
Could you guys go back to the floor plan?
Which one?
Just the main floor plan, probably. Well, so in this space, I think that's not necessarily true. I mean, it depends on what those functions are. If you're doing a structured sport that is like volleyball and or basketball, yes. If you've got dedicated for that. But if you're doing batting, you could also be doing some kind of smaller, pickleball or some kind of, maybe the youth kids could be going this way, 5-year-olds playing ball, basketball, with this component down. But for the most part, in a big structured event, yes, it's one. But remember, there's these other rooms up here that are available too. That I think, if you jump back one more, here. There. And this could actually become one larger. So I think there's something else, yoga, who knows, there's other things that are going on. But there's one large sport that I'm thinking of the volume of the gym portion. It would become a schedule. But the great thing about that is I think they didn't do this in the 40s, but we can integrate it now because it's just the way things get done. That space can transform in about 2-3 minutes. Where is the basketball goes and where the volleyball goes, where the back changes, or the swing. So creating that ability to morph the space is paramount.
Since we're tearing out the existing floor that's original, are there any parameters we have to work with it to recreate that floor again?
SHPO has a say in that. And that was a discussion point with them. There are large portions of the floor that are really kind of experiencing some significant damage if you're in there. It's all at the corner, wherever these pieces are, and it's all tied to water. Water that was previously getting in. But the idea of utilizing this as a multi-purpose sports floor in lieu of just keeping the existing wood floor that is now 80 plus years old. Yes, 80. The idea was to try and salvage some of this floor and reuse it to have a facility in creative ways that might be smart, so we're keeping that original material, but coming back with more of a sports floor material that is a little more multi-purpose, multi-function. And so, does that answer your question? SHPO would like us to try and get that, whatever new flooring we put down, to emulate what was there before in terms of growth. And this is kind of part and parcel of buying into those tax credits. They get to have a say with that. That doesn't mean that we can't stripe it however we want to stripe it, but they would like the look of the wood floor. So, and there's some great manufacturers out there that do this kind of multi-sport floor that actually emulates the look of the wood floor.
So the discussion in the committee about that wood floor was to salvage it and use it in the different rooms as like a focal wall of that wood floor, so we still have the basic wood floor.
Those pull-out bleachers, I don't know if they were there originally,
They actually got sold,
so they're gone.
they technically, they got sold at, so.
But you wouldn't have to put those back as part of the original design.
That is what they would classify as historic material that was already gone from the facility. And there are skeleton pieces of it left. Oh, really? Okay. Well, he's gotten some of it, but there's like a piece of no, yeah.
I'm not sure he will donate it back to this.
I ideally, and if we went back to the section that was cut this way, I think we could line chairs,
Yeah, I saw that.
stackable chairs here to get quite a few more people. Ideally, if you're using this in a team scenario, benches to me make sense kind of up in this area. That way the kids are putting their stuff away, and then you have the observation piece and all of this seating. This line currently doesn't carry the idea of having features.
Is there anything inherent to the current condition of the bones that, would require moving forward town action? Is there any of that that's driving town? Or is
I think
it?
he's talking about,
Well, I'm just talking about if we took the same plan and did it 5 years from now, is there anything that would happen, did nothing between now and then, that would prevent this going at a later date?
When the building was donated, there really was, and I speak of saving the building or stabilizing the building, but it's not stabilizing from a structural standpoint. It was really all about water infiltration, and that water is getting into the building. We did a hazardous material survey. We believe the building is clean from an asbestos standpoint, and it was not when it was built. I can guarantee you. It's been removed at some point previous to us getting here. But the biggest piece of the building is suffering now is there's no real functioning mechanical system, and the roof is allowing a lot of water, which is why the floor was deteriorating as quickly as it was. And so when I speak of stabilizing it, there is a roof on the building that is now dried in. We should not be pouring water into the structure anymore. The mechanical system that is there has been kind of pulled apart. It doesn't function. I've had 2 or 3 different groups look at it, and they give me mixed, discussions. But the piece of drying the building out before we can start cleaning the building, that's about the most important piece in terms of stabilizing that existing structure that's out there.
That could be done in 2 years, maybe next year, and there's no additional expense needed to do it sooner or later. That's all I'm asking.
can the mold keep growing?
Well, I mean, that would be the,
Yes, it can. It should be slowing down. But if you're not conditioning the air that's in the space and drying it out, you still have a very humid, like today, that old building collects that heat. Old buildings like this carry what they call thermal mass, right? So they will swing very slowly with temperature. It'll get cold, but it'll stay warm in that building for some time while all that thick stone is kind of cooling off. So you do have this, you should be moving air out of it to dry it out. The mold conditions that exist now, they'll continue to get worse, but at a lower rate, much lower rate.
that's fine. I mean, I just, don't take my question as what I believe you should do. I just want to make sure that we're all, have all the information that if there is a reason we need to move quickly, we know what that is.
Then you can get into the discussions of if you're doing remediation and putting conditions, you're running an air conditioner now. If you're doing that to the building now, at the time you get to the point where you're ready to do something with the building from a construction standpoint, you're ready. Right now, a contractor, I'm not sure they'll be too excited about going in there.
Okay.
It's too strong.
However, I thought we were gonna put the roof on it so we would be able to have plenty of time to decide what to do.
The roof had to be on ASAP because
Right.
the water was pouring.
Right.
It
Yeah, I
is-
thought that was gonna give us time in order to figure out what to do.
It has, yeah, it has, because that's why we have it.
What I'm hearing is there is no real timeline to force it, like the roof did, force some action to take place to save it. I hear that the mold potentially is something we have to watch, but it isn't driving the need to do it at any given time. That's what I heard.
The process before you would want to do anything with the building or have a contractor remediate they can come in. It's a pretty aggressive process, and generally it involves spraying around the leach. Is what it really is. I mean, I'm sure there's a little more to it than that, but it is that. And you're right. The roof on it has gone a long way towards slowing the progress of that. You would walk in that building and your glasses would just fall over because of the humidity. And, I think that I'm just sure that's going to improve. I can't say it's going to. Logically, another step would be to have some kind of mechanical system, albeit not intended to run the life of the building, but drying the building out. So, yes.
To the committee, I mean, what you've got here is fantastic, by the way. What you've done is tremendous. It's, you know, I think it gets everybody their level playing field here as far as understanding, and then getting community inputs going to be essential. Is there any other use cases that you guys contemplated using this for, or did it immediately go to this, or what was the process for that?
One of the best parts about this project, I feel like, is that each of us represents a certain demographic, and so we were able to sort of throw all of our ideas on the table. Community center right away was what we were thinking, because, you know, while I might be a 40-something with a kid with sports, we also have community members who could benefit from having open spaces, particularly the older part of the community that plays cards. You know, we're trying to think about how we can meet the needs of all of the members in our community, and so each of us have an opportunity to discuss that and talk about it. And Jay's done a great job of taking our words and putting it into a vision for us. And while this isn't like something set in stone, this gave us something to look at. We're not very visual learners, so it's good to see it and put a number to it. And so I think that community center is really what we've been talking about. I grew up in a town that had a community center and right down the street, and I know what that looks like. Sort of some of the things we talked about were, you know, we don't want this to just be about sports. We love some of the feedback we've gotten initially was we love that the kids have a place to go. We love the location in town because kids can walk there. In the rec office would have the flexibility to manage the timeline of what can go on in there. Whereas I don't know if they have that ability right now. So the community center really is what we would hope for it to be, but you know, we're very open to whatever the community needs are.
I think that comes down to pieces of is, you know, multiple uses. I remember some of the events that take place in the booths that make all kinds of things. And when you heard from community members about that, it's hard to tell that the community used to have granted a lot of them were sports, but when you think of the next purpose of it, we really wanted something that was flexible. So while it was a gymnasium, that's why we're focusing on things that are retractable. So you have this large space that can be utilized for all sorts of services, as well as those meeting areas. A lot of people, some people don't do sports, but they still need a place to go. It's nice to have another place for kids to hang out safely, for seniors to go, especially when school is in session. They need a place to, they don't have to play basketball and those sorts of things, and not worry about, you know, knocking over kids or getting knocked over themselves, or just a nice place for them to do. We felt like the warming kitchen adds another level to that. It gives a little more flexibility if that wants to be a banquet hall or to serve meals, maybe senior meals. We're just trying to kind of think of multiple uses for multiple generations of how we can use that space to truly get, you know, community center, not just only focused on the sports where it used to be.
Does the SHPO tax credit limit you to what you could actually do? Couldn't make it office space. That wasn't the original. I mean, would that be? So are there limits to what you can actually use that for, at least design it to, and still qualify for SHPO credits?
Please, yes.
You can, yes. For example, I just recently took a ballroom and turned it into sleeping bunks for a fire department. You have to be very careful about how you do it. SHPO, I'm sure, would love this use because it's the original use.
Yeah.
It's in essence the original use continuing to serve the community, right? But you could go in and divide that up and do other spaces. You have to touch the existing condition. If you go into, and a great example is City Hall. If you go in here and look at some of the offices that are there, they have kind of one piece of glass that's coated around the existing trim, and they want it to touch just barely, right? So that you see the original finishes that were there. That kind of approach.
I would be interested to know what other ideas on this. I mean, you presented us with a community plan, but I'd like to hear what other ideas that you would.
I mean, our very first meeting, we identified this as a gap in the community. We don't have a space that can bring everybody together. We don't have a space where, seniors can go and kids can come after school and, you can have your anniversary party. I mean, we need this diverse space, so really that's what our focus has been from the beginning, because that's the biggest gap we could identify.
And it does meet the strategic plan that's already in place with the rec department and the city. So we felt like that was just an easy decision to make because we weren't limiting the scope of what this project could be. It was more like, what could we do with this space to meet everybody's needs?
And it's really what this building lends itself to.
And part of the reason that I was so drawn to it is because we knew the Bauer family and we want to honor the spirit of this building and the gift that was given to the city. And so we've talked a lot about how can we honor that and still bring that present into the building. We talked about harvesting the wood and using that throughout. Maybe we create something that can be in the rooms, or we can do something to honor that part of the project. So it's got lots of layers to it, but I think that ultimately what we decided as a group was that it made the most sense to be a community center.
So, is the rec on board with this?
We've met with the Recreation Commission, their board, a couple of times. We have taken their feedback, given it back to Jay, and do his magic, made some changes. I think that we built a good partnership. We've had good discussion. I think that it will go a long way to partner even further with that, but I think it's more about, what can we do to make this project be something that everybody's proud of, and I would love to continue that partnership as we move forward with whatever the city decides or the community decides that they want to do with the space.
The other thing that was discussed that we haven't talked about much was, the funding. I know that the survey just showed sales tax and property tax, that's because that's the two revenue streams for the city for a project like this. But what was also discussed was going after grants. Once we knew what the city wanted, going after the grants to limit the expense to the citizens as well. And on top of that, we briefly talked about how we'd like this to be a free space, that you don't have to have a membership to come, so that way it serves the undervalued at the same level as everybody else. So that was discussed as well. Just briefly, just discussing the uses and stuff, so that we're all around it. Just so the public knows it's listening and all that. That was the direction.
So if there's gonna be a sales tax vote in April, I think there's a lot of things that need to be answered before you even think about doing that. Like, who's going to manage it, who's going to make reservations for the different spaces, and all of those questions, I haven't heard any answers to that.
Yeah, so that's part of the community engagement aspect that they're getting. The community's getting ready to go out and do is start engaging with the different groups in the community to get feedback and also have those discussions before it is brought to the council to vote to put it on the ballot.
So Glenn, is it 90 days before an election that you would need to have that filed, as you want that.
That is what the county clerk always will tell you, they prefer to have it minimum 90 days.
It's kind of looking right after the New Year's.
Right, yeah, so you have to really by January decide, depending on what date you can do it. We say April, it could be any time.
That's right, because this would be a special election.
Yeah, we don't have, it'll be a special election, and so we don't have the, spring elections like we used to have, they're all in November now, so that's what's happened to us, so we could set the date. But just, then, once you do that, come back 90 days, and that's, that question would be, that's the mechanics.
So that's, the committee just set out a timeline for themselves, so that they can start looking for the process, similar to the other projects. Stuff like that. But they wanted the county, obviously they want the county to hear all this information first, before they start sharing.
I know it's important for you also to understand the Recreation Commission's stance on this. I have their plan with me here. Looking in that, I read the words new community center. I don't know if that means new structure. I don't know if it means this particular place, but during our strategic planning that we had in this room, it was really just us, and we haven't, I don't think, released that out to the public yet in this forum, but one of the goals that we had was to formalize and really strengthen the relationship with the commission because of the things that we do share and depend on each other for. So it's really important to me to understand, I shouldn't be looking at you two, look at you guys over here, look at Susan, remember the auditorium stuff, right? That's what we would like to know. I know personally I would, as a council member, it's really crucial to me to understand how that's going to work, to what Julie was saying too, how it's going to be managed. I know in these other committees that we have, in Public Works, we have probably several $100,000 of new things that are just going to come up that we need to look at and talk about and plan for. We got to take care of a lot of things, and so sometimes I get kind of nervous when we have these once in a lifetime opportunities. I love this plan and the work that you've done. I fully understand what it's like to do one of these projects where you need to handle on certain things, but it's a really nice plan. I really got to know what the commission.
I certainly don't want to speak for the rec commission, but I do feel positive about the direction. I mean, I don't think this is what they had originally intended to think about when we talked about a new space. I know that we've talked in town multiple times about the nice big one, but what our hope is that we can create some awareness of how much this is needed in our community. And my hope, we talked about, is that we will outgrow this space and we will need something much bigger. A lot of us in this demographic travel outside of the town. We buy dinner. We spend lots of money when we could keep it all here and keep our kids here. And we're not I don't think we're necessarily looking for this to be holding, tournaments and all that. It's just a great space for lots of different people to use in the community that may not have specific programming going on where the kids can just go in and shoot baskets. I mean, I can't tell you how many times in town in the winter we're just like scrambling trying to find a place to go. So I feel like it would be a nice stepping stone for the project that they would like to finish this out, but I don't want to speak for them.
No, I'm glad you brought that up, because that's kind of my, this whole time was that I felt like the second we moved in there, people have been drawing for a community center for a long time. I know not everybody, but that the second you got in there, you outgrow it. And that goes back to why, the recommendation is a 1/4 cent, maybe a 1/2 cent. 1/4 cent covers you for this community center. The other 1/4 cent goes toward maybe that quality of life, which you put forth the ballot. And again, the second community center is 1/2. So, kind of get back to the 1/4 cent, which is going to be decided. So it's going to be written a lot of on the ballot.
Well, and that's something that we talked a lot about, and we feel very passionately. We want to make sure that the community knows that we're not just throwing a bunch of things up there and saying, we'll pay for whatever. We want to be good stewards of the money, and whether that's 1/4 cent, and then just using what we have for this project, we're doing a 1/2% and saving for the future. We want to make sure that we're looking at all options, including grants and other funding mechanisms. We just want to see this succeed. So whatever the community supports, we're looking for.
You hit on one of my biggest concerns is that Without a community center, any community center is a huge step forward, right? So it's hard to say, I don't want that. Of course you want it. The question is, does it then limit us to do something that if you brought the rec commission together with other stakeholders, that it would be different space? And so I think when we do this, realistically, it's going to limit us from doing anything else for a long time. I mean, saying you're going to outgrow it and build something bigger. So it's really, what's the growth plan? When do we think that's going to happen? Is that 4 years? If it is, do we try to build that first instead of taking advantage of this great growth we got and fitting something into it that will all use, but we may outgrow? So the biggest concern is how this is going to impact maybe what we would do if this building never became available. If the community center is important to the city council, there should be plans on what it would look like, how you would go forward with it. I don't know that it wouldn't be this size anyway. But my concern is just what you stated, is that we hope to outgrow it. I hope not to for a long time, because I think we're going to be limited in doing something else.
I agree. And like Ronnie had with the strategic plan for the rec center, it's like, community center was one of their top priorities to do. And, I actually talked to Matt one day about it, how does this building fit into your plan to do a community center? Gave us some plan. And he said, well, he was very critical. He said, well, it's kind of whatever the community wants. But on the other hand, like on the survey that you guys sent out, do the people know what is planned for the building? I mean, everybody wants a community center, but do they want this community center, or do they want a community center that is really, like,
Well, I think that's why it's important to remember that this is just preliminary.
yeah.
This is our way of just saying we put a lot of thought into this, but that doesn't mean that it's set in stone. We are very open to whatever the community wants, and ultimately it might come down to, you know what, they won't go for it. But we feel like this might be a way to move forward without having to wait 10 or 15 years. Because eventually, I'll speak for myself, I won't always be in this demographic. I would like to think, 15 years down the road after, like my daughter grows up, I'll have a place to go that's not still being talked about needing to build. So I think that's why we look at it as a stepping stone.
I think what's also important too is that, it seems strange to talk about this new building because, what we want it to be. And it's about what it will be when we don't use it for what it's hoped to be used for again. And so it's also important too, if let's say a new community center does come in and that demand is there, and we need to go build a new big community center. Well, we got a 10-year, 15-year-old brand new community center, well, what's that going to be now? And that's something else that we're trying to think about going forward, is what's the secondary use of that building if we do end up inevitably outgrowing it? And does this design fit for that maybe secondary use? Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
And, 1.7 million is a big step. That's kind of a lot of money to spend on something that's, you're already out there.
Yeah, I mean, you put it on the first slide, the building's landmark. I mean, there's no expanding it, there's no nothing, so you have what you got. And, I think if we were to have a different conversation right now, and this were a conversation about tearing down that building, I think this would be packed all the way out now 8th Street. I mean, nobody wants to see the building go away, this is our way of kind of, this is our way of making, a cherished, treasured building, stay alive in the community. It's great, but it does come with its problems. It is, you can't expand it. It's completely landlocked. You don't have a parking lot.
I think there's a lot of options. If we outgrow the space and we build a recreation center, this can still remain a community center. You can have two different entities, or you can have a senior center. I mean, there's a lot of different uses that still come into. So they could provide additional needs. This is a recreation center. It's a community. If we were to build something specific to the rec, it would be a recreation
I'm saying to stay cognizant of that, of what it's going to be, because let's say in 10 years, we end up, we got through this, the second we stepped into it, we got this, let's say, $3 million project now, and now in order to make this what we need it to be for the secondary use, we have another $1 million renovation. Maybe be thinking about it. Would this function right now as is as a senior center? I think a lot of it could. I'm just trying to drive that. If we do outgrow it, we're all talking about, we're all thinking it, what that's going to look like. Are we going to have huge, we're going to be turned down brand new drywall with the sheetrock still drying with the audio.
But I think that's the exact conversation we need to be having with the rec. What does your programming look like? What does this not do? How do we put it into a plan that may drive the second half percent of sales tax to get there in years to this other facility? As opposed to wait until we're out around it. You plan for what you would like to do and start building it in and funding it. But that's going to require all these other stakeholders come forward and say, well, this really doesn't fit my needs. Here's what does. And that's what that second building would look like. And maybe it still leverages the first building. Maybe the second building, only half as big as it would be if we didn't have it. But those conversations should be happening so that everybody's plans are at least somewhat interdependent. And I think then the sales tax, question becomes why would you ask for more? Well, here's why. There's a long range plan.
Right. Well, I think Susan alluded to it earlier. Half cent sales tax by the math, get up with our capability, then this building will get up about 7 to 8 years. So that frees up that financing that's already in place versus trying to do it. Right.
Yeah, I think what you guys were saying, having a plan B
Yeah.
for this building is
Of course,
definitely
it's
something.
That part that you said that it's a treasure, we can't forget that because this is the 6th building that's on the National Registry in this town. We are working on turning in more. Women's Bridge, I know Baker is looking at turning in more buildings and actually talking about possibly creating a district, which is going to be a part of. I don't know that it would benefit the gym necessarily, but to start looking at these assets that most towns of 4,500 do not have 6 historic sites on the registry. Casey and I come from Falls Line. We have one. Hopefully nobody's watching from Western Plains, but I have one from there are places that I have looked up that did raise these, we torn down. And we did save something last year, we committed to that. The citizens have made a commitment already, $200,000 I think was for 100, so it's less than that. The citizens have, so we need to make sure that we look at it as sort of what can this mean for tourism that we've talked about, that was on the top priority when you're doing strategic planning. I think it can fit into that. I think what I see here can fit into that. It's not just basketball, football, it fits into all of those. It's a treasure.
It's more room too. The more tourist dollars you get coming into town, the more sales tax that can come to the building.
And when you market the town, I'm sure, how can you say we're going to
Right.
Well, I think it's a draw for people moving into the community. They're looking for that quality of life piece that we can provide. I think Baldwin is very good at providing that, and I think this would just be another piece of that puzzle. Absolutely.
Well, you look at other communities around us that have community centers, some do, some don't. It's just the opportunity to have like it's presented to us, where it is community centers. Hope to build to it first facility.
Is there any discussion about documenting the history and displaying it in there? I mean, it's part of the whole.
Yes.
We did.
Yes.
I mean, you can make it part of the, a destination, someone that wants to go see the sites and here's
I
where you
would
go.
love to see that.
I think it would be neat to pull in the library in that aspect.
Yeah.
And have them be a stakeholder at the table, just having their input on how can we tie this together. And keep in mind, that's where we're heading. Like, I think that's the next step, is really to try to figure out who else needs to be sitting at the table to have those discussions, so that we can get more feedback, so that it really does look more like a community built project than what we are. That's just, if we were at the end of the line and we had done those things, I'd be pretty disappointed.
may be jumping in like we're at the end of the line, we're at the beginning, but it's really kind of the first time we've seen it. We've been through all this, we haven't, so, I think what you're gonna go through, that's where we're gonna get really all the information that Drew is gonna need to make a decision through the next 4 months.
I think the projected project's great, mitigating design and all that.
Yeah, no, perfect. Couldn't move forward without it. I mean, we'd be stuck, way back, starting this out, so, this certainly has accelerated getting to a decision and getting to a decision based on a lot of input, a lot of data, so, fantastic work.
Any more questions? Well, I just want to thank, Jay, Arlena, Casey, for all your guys' work. These are never easy, to go through a project like this.
It's been a lot of meetings.
To, 9 months of work, and then, you really feel, like you're just getting started. So, we've got a taste of that for Sullivan Square. And, it can be daunting and trying, and you'll question yourselves a lot. But I appreciate you guys stepping forward and taking the torch for the city on this and doing really the labor to see something happen. So, thank you guys so much.
Thank you. So we done with first Sullivan
Hey, we got the crowd.
Yes, the bubble can is half empty.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah.
Thank you. Now, the crack in the wall.